If you're dealing with perfectionism anxiety and you're looking for a proven way to overcome it, then you are 1000% in the right place. My name is Ty Hicks, founder of Mental Health Coaching. I'm glad you're here, and I'm just not going to waste your time with any kind of long intro. Let's just go ahead and get right into it. So, as you can see today, the title of today's presentation is Free from Perfectionism Anxiety in 90 Days, the method that 612 people have used when therapy, medications, and coping mechanisms failed them, all by identifying the hidden game that your subconscious keeps playing and rewriting the rules. So I just want to point out right from the very beginning, if I heard someone claim that the underlying core of anxiety could be overcome in 90 days back when I was struggling with my anxiety, I really would have thought to myself, like, there's absolutely no way. This is total BS. How in the world can this guy claim that something that I've been struggling with for years is something that can be overcome in just 90 days? And I just want to point out right out of the gate that if you are skeptical, I totally get it. After all, I mean, you've probably tried just about every damn thing you can think of to deal with your anxiety already. And you have no clue probably who I am, how this process works, if it could work for you. So, of course, it wouldn't sound believable. But I do want to tell you, I do have the proof to show you that this works. Okay. So, for starters, I used to have incredibly extreme anxiety for years and insecurities for years. And the method I'll be teaching you today helped me finally overcome my own anxiety when therapy, medication, and coping mechanisms just did not work for me. In addition to that, in the past 8 years of doing this professionally, I've had 612 clients that I've worked with one on one. And what we do is we survey them before they use the method I'm going to teach you today to assess how severe their anxiety is before starting. And then we also survey them after they've finished implementing our system. And the typical minimum result that they report is a reduction in the severity and frequency of the anxiety by 75%. So most of our clients actually do much better than the 75%. But the 75% reduction is pretty much the typical minimum that we experience when a client implements this system. And, I really just want to invite you, if that still sounds unbelievable, you're always welcome at any time. You can go to our website. You can see totally transparently all of the case studies we have. To date, we have 241 documented case studies and testimonials where people describe their experience in their own words. And in addition to that, we've also maintained a 5-star rating for 8 years online as well. And the results that this method produce are just completely transparent, unlike any other company that is out there assisting people with their mental health. So just at any time you want, go ahead and go to ty-hicks.com/testimonies, and you can hear it directly from people who've gone through it. And while we have countless documented, proven case studies of the method I'm going to show you today, working for all types of anxiety, what's really cool is that perfectionism anxiety is one of the most common types of issues that our clients come to us to have us solve for them. So today, what I'm going to be doing is I'm really going to be showing you why perfectionism anxiety tends to come back, why it feels so exhausting, why everything you've tried so far has failed. And probably more importantly than that, I'm going to be showing you the new proven way to get rid of it once and for all that is working just incredibly well for people like you. And it's working a lot easier and simpler too. Because the truth that I want you to really understand is this: if you're struggling with perfectionism anxiety, it is not your fault, and it is not because you're broken or it's unfixable. It's probably just because you've been following a system that was never designed to actually fix the problem in the first place. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about how to do that exactly. So first off, who is this for? Just so you know you're in the right place. Well, this is for anybody who's constantly kind of caught in that grip of perfectionism, the kind that keeps your mind spinning, your body tense. You're always one mistake away from everything falling apart, or at least it seems that way. This is all for you. Maybe you've tried therapy, medication, self-help books, journaling, productivity hacks. Maybe those things have given you a little bit of relief, but none of it has been enough to actually stop the relentless pressure to be flawless. This is also for you if you constantly feel like you're walking a mental tightrope, terrified of letting someone down or making the wrong move. You get anxious about not doing enough, and then anxious about being anxious. This is for you if small errors feel like disasters, right? If missing a deadline or even just not doing your best sends you into a spiral of self-criticism. It's also for you if you've stayed up late rereading an email 5 times before sending it, or you have avoided starting something at all because you're worried it might not be perfect when you complete it. This is for you if you've always wore the label of perfectionist with a small feeling of honor, but a ton of dread at the same time. Okay, then if that's you, you're definitely in the right place. And lastly, if you just can't seem to ever shake the underlying fear that you're not really good enough, that you're not really whole, right? If some part of you feels like you're holding back that total sense of self-acceptance and self-love, then you're in the right place. And if that is you, I just really want to tell you, I want you to know I see you, I get you, I've been there, you're in the right place. Okay. So today we're going to answer the most important question for overcoming your anxiety. Now, whether you realize this is the most important question for overcoming your anxiety or not, this is definitely what it is. And here's the real question we need to answer. How do we stop trying to respond to the surface level symptoms of anxiety and every anxious thought, and instead finally eliminate the anxiety at the source? Okay, so if you have perfectionism anxiety, you already know that your mind continuously has automatic negative thoughts that are totally involuntary, and you probably wasted a ton of time and energy constantly reacting to those automatic thoughts. So the entire idea behind a coping mechanism is to be able to respond to those anxious thoughts in a way that brings some kind of relief. Now, think about it for a second. If you knew how to finally address the true source of the anxiety, where your mind is no longer automatically generating the anxious thoughts to begin with, well, you would basically have no more limitations on being able to live the life that you want to live, wouldn't you? And you would have basically no more need for those coping mechanisms either. But I actually want to take this one step further, right? Not just how do we do this, and not just how do we do this in 90 days or less, but in addition, how do we do it in a simple, easy, common sense, and proven way that's really going to last? Okay, how do we do this without you having to rely on band-aid solutions like medication, where you trade one unwanted feeling for an unwanted side effect? How do we do this without you feeling like you were just sitting in a room with a therapist talking about the same stuff over and over, waiting endlessly to be given some clarity, to be given a real plan, when instead it just feels like you're kind of spinning your wheels, right? How do we do this without doing something bizarre and, kind of a total Hail Mary like hypnosis and energy work and acupuncture, or any of these other crazy things that you see out there that, hey, I'm sure they add some value. They probably work for some portion of people, but let's be honest, they're not really dealing with the source of the problem. And how do we do this without exerting a lot of effort? Using some kind of like crazy exposure therapy system, or just trying to white knuckle it, or use all your willpower, right? How do we do this simple, easy, proven? Okay, that's the question that we're going to answer today. Now, just in case you're still thinking this is not possible to do, I just want to take a quick second, introduce myself, because it's very important that you understand that it is. And the big thing that keeps people from overcoming their anxiety is the presumption that they can't overcome their anxiety. We will never ever solve a problem that we have convinced ourselves is unsolvable. So we've got to make sure that you get the evidence that this is really possible for you. Okay, so like I said before, my name is Ty Hicks, founder of Mental Health Coaching. And I want you to understand, I used to have debilitating anxiety to the point that it made me suicidal. And I had a suicide plan that was interrupted suddenly at the last minute by a family member. And then I ended up being admitted into a psych hospital for 10 days. And I, from then on, tried therapy and multiple medications for years. And they didn't really work for me, even though I really, really wanted to get better. And I really tried to use those methods to get better. They just didn't really gel for me. And it really was only once I developed the process I'm going to be teaching you that I finally overcame my anxiety. And since then, I've actually stayed anxiety free for 15 years and counting, all without any medications, therapy, or relying on any coping mechanisms whatsoever. And, let me point out, I mean, you don't get me wrong, my life is not perfect, right? I'm not a guy with all the answers. I'm still human and have the occasional negative thought or feeling here or there, but the difference is I no longer have that repetitive, limiting anxiety, right? It's not this like dreary, heavy thing. I no longer have what I call capital A anxiety, if that makes sense. Just the like really normal stuff that comes and goes, like very rarely, like, if I'm driving on the road and a car legitimately almost hits me, right? I might feel nervous for a few seconds. And the thing is, I definitely no longer feel an urge like I used to try to be perfect or to please everybody all the time. I felt so horrifically insecure for so long, and thankfully, that's just not really the case anymore. And my sense of self-worth is just no longer up for negotiation like it used to be. So I just want you to know that, I'm living proof that this is possible, but it'd be easy to think, well, it worked for you. How in the world could it work for me? So as I mentioned before, over the past 8 years, I've also helped 612 clients use this same process to overcome their anxiety too. People from every walk of life you can imagine, people on 5 different continents, ranging from the age of 13 all the way up to 84. People, men, women, transgender people, non-binary people, people who've experienced trauma, people who grew up with single parents, no parents, both parents, just about every type of background you can encounter, people who've had multiple diagnoses, anxiety, depression, bipolar, et cetera, right? All of that stuff, I've encountered it many, many times. And this method has worked so well. I've even got to work with some really cool people. So I actually got to work a couple of years ago with Olympic athlete Abby Napton to help her overcome her perfectionism and performance anxiety, and helped her land a spot on the diving team of Team USA, which was really cool. So she got referred to me by a previous client. Took us about 9 weeks to get that sorted out for her, which was pretty neat. Now, because our process is working better than anything else out there, and I've been doing this now for almost a decade, I've gotten a ton of copycats over the years, but almost no one gets it right, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the fastest and the most effective way to do this. Now, before I dig into that, we quickly need to talk about what doesn't work and what tends to get in the way for people trying to overcome perfectionism anxiety, because really 90% of what's being taught in the mental health industry today simply does not work. It takes way too long, and people have no clue that there is a much smarter, faster, easier alternative that's working so much better. So I want to cover this with you because there's so many ads out there, there's so much content, there's so many people trying to rope you into one strategy or another. And I really don't think I'd be doing my job as an industry leader if I didn't make it really clear to you what is working and what is not working right now in the industry today. So let's talk about what's happening in the industry right now. What is going on? Well, in the past few years, what's been fascinating is there's basically 3 things that have happened that I believe are absolutely ruining people's health, and they don't even realize that they're slipping into. But you've probably seen a little bit of this. So, first, the rate of prescriptions being thrown at anxious people has never been higher. And ever since the COVID pandemic in particular, more and more people are getting prescribed anti-anxiety medication, even though the results that those medications produce has never been statistically lower than it is right now. So, in fact, according to a study that was done by Behavioral Health Business in 2024, antidepressant prescriptions, which are commonly prescribed for anxiety as well, increased by approximately 21% from 2019 to 2022, with a notable rise in telehealth prescriptions from 1.5% in 2019 to almost 32% in 2022. And that trend has basically continued ever since. And a big reason is because well-meaning people like yourself who just want to feel some kind of relief, they just want to be normal, right? They just want to live their regular life. They slip into this trap of mistakenly believing that the source of their anxiety is biochemical, even though this is completely categorically and empirically false. Okay, so let me explain. So, most people have no clue about this, but there was a recent peer-reviewed medical meta study, which, if you're not familiar, that is basically the highest caliber of academic research that is. It means that the researchers were medically trained. It also means that the research was then peer reviewed. Okay, so this was not just like a isolated one-time thing. This has been peer reviewed and vetted, and this research that was done pretty recently basically found that, quote, there is no conclusive evidence that low serotonin levels cause depression or anxiety. Despite the popularity of the serotonin theory, research suggests no significant difference in serotonin activity between those with and without depression and anxiety. Okay. Furthermore, the study went on to say, quote, the chemical imbalance theory was heavily promoted by pharmaceutical companies in the 1990s to market SSRIs, even though studies now show that SSRIs do not correct a serotonin imbalance. Furthermore, quote, clinical trials have demonstrated that antidepressants, SSRIs, are often barely distinguishable from placebos in terms of effectiveness. Okay, so all this is from the University of College London. Okay, and even more research has shown that, quote, the serotonin theory is not supported by scientific evidence and should no longer be presented as a factual explanation of depression or anxiety. That's a quote from Molecular Psychiatry. And then finally, quote, SSRIs and similar treatments only have any kind of positive effect in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. That's from Science Daily. Okay, so even though all of this has been reproven in these recent studies that have happened in the early and mid 2020s, it was actually proven previously back in 2015 and as early as 2005 that the source of anxiety was not biochemical. This research has proven this for a long time. It's just that the mainstream public just is not very aware of it. So one pair of researchers found that, quote, this is from 2015, quote, the FDA had accepted aspirational language in the past that these drugs, quote, help to restore the brain's chemical balance and bring serotonin levels closer to normal, even though both claims were and remain scientifically meaningless, end quote. Okay. There is no such thing as a scientifically established correct balance of serotonin. That's from the researchers. So the entire theory that anxiety was caused by a biochemical imbalance and could be corrected by medication, most people don't know this. It is actually just a myth. It was literally just a theory, and it was a myth that was sold to the public. It has never been corroborated, ever. It has never been proven. And it has been disproven at least 3 times by peer-reviewed medical researchers in the past 25 years. But the mainstream public just doesn't really know about that. Okay, so let me be very clear. I do not in any way hold this against doctors or psychiatrists for prescribing this stuff, because there are some things going on with the medical industry that make it difficult for doctors to be aware of the most recent cutting edge research. All right, so doctors primarily do 3 main things. Number one, they try to help their patients feel better with whatever tools they have available. Number two, they recommend things that other doctors are doing to try to help their patients. And number three, they keep recommending what they are used to recommending. So it usually takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years for new cutting edge medical research or knowledge to actually get from the academic studies and then get into the hands of actual daily practicing doctors, right? And so there's just a lot of lag and there's a lot of inertia that keeps the industry doing what it's always done. So here's a quote from a psychiatrist when he was asked about this phenomenon of prescribing anti-anxiety medication for something that was never proven to help reduce anxiety. This was a public interview with psychiatrist Daniel Carlat. This is from Science Daily. And the psychiatrist Daniel Carlat said, quote, we don't know, as referring to psychiatrists, psychiatrists don't know how the medications actually work in the brain. I will often say something like, the way Zoloft works is it increases the level of serotonin in your brain, and presumably the reason you're depressed or anxious is that you have some sort of deficiency. And I say that to my patients not because I really believe it, because I know the evidence really isn't there for us to understand the mechanism. I think I say that because patients want to know something. And they want to know that as physicians, we have some basic understanding of what we're doing when we are prescribing medications. They certainly don't want to know that a psychiatrist essentially has no idea how these medications work. End quote. So the thing that you got to understand here is that in short, doctors are doing what doctors are trained to do: diagnose and prescribe medication. That's what they're trained to do. They don't know how to actually get to the real root of the subconscious problem. It's not their expertise, it's not their specialty. They just look at anxiety as if it's the same thing as diabetes or heart disease, and it's not. So they prescribe drugs because they're trying to use any tool in their tool belt that may produce results. But the bottom line here is that, quote, SSRIs and similar treatments are only somewhat effective in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. That's from Science Daily. So no one knows this, though, right? So patients with anxiety simply assume that their doctors are giving them a solution to their anxiety problem when they get a prescription. They have no clue that it's statistically very unlikely to help at all. It's basically a coin toss whether it's going to help you at all, 50-50, and it's only a 25% chance that it's going to actually solve the problem for you. Okay, or not even really solve the problem, but give you sufficient relief where you're not really concerned about it. And not only that, but medical research now, especially in the past 10 years, now that people have been taking these medications for decades, more and more research is showing that these anti-anxiety medications are now being linked with all sorts of issues. It's now been confirmed that anti-anxiety medication is linked with a higher chance of developing Alzheimer's, cardiovascular issues, cognitive impairment, dementia, and of course, really, really scary stuff like serotonin syndrome and tardive dyskinesia, which I've actually had probably 24 clients who've had those issues who came to me because they literally could not take their medication anymore. Not to mention, just the physical dependence that people develop and the need to slowly taper off that it creates. It basically creates an addiction. So, what most people do who really want to get their anxiety dealt with, they just want to feel normal, they just want to feel relief. What they do is they do what I call playing the pharmaceutical lottery, right? They think that they should do whatever their doctor recommends and that they will find the quote right medication cocktail eventually. And, they just got to tweak the dosages and the prescriptions enough. And this does work for some people, as the research just showed, right? 25% of people do find full symptom relief with medication. But most people will waste months or years tweaking with their dosages and prescriptions only to get very, very small improvements in their results. And they start to think that there's something wrong with them or they're just going to feel like this forever. And they don't realize over half of the population is just like you, where they find medication insufficient. So, just taking a step back for a second, right? Like, why in the world would we ingest something into our body for years and years that isn't even solving the real problem? It gives us weird side effects. Most doctors agree you won't be able to take it forever anyway, and it literally causes your body to have a physical addiction to it. I mean, it just doesn't really make any sense, right? But this is the power of the inertia in society. This is the power of just doing what has always been done. And that's the very dangerous thing that's caused most of the problems for us as human beings in our history, is just doing the things the way they've always been done. So let's just think about it from a common sense perspective for a second, right? How is taking any kind of pill going to get you to finally be accepting and loving of yourself? Right? How is any pill going to fix your lack of self-esteem? It just doesn't make any sense, right? Now, to be 100% clear before we move on from this, I'm not recommending you go to your medicine cabinet and flush your pills down the drain, okay? Do not do that. Even for the clients that I work with, where I help them get to the real root of the anxiety, I always tell them right away, we have to deal with the real root of the problem first. And then you need to work with your doctor to create a weaning off schedule that's not going to give you issues. Because if you try to cut out the medication before you deal with the real underlying root source of the anxiety, you're just going to make your life a total mess. Do not do that. So do not stop taking your prescribed medication. Don't change that. Just want to make that very, very clear. Okay. So, but I do want you to just know that If you have been trying to solve your anxiety problem with medication and it hasn't worked, it doesn't mean you're defective. It means you are part of the 75% of the population that medication is just insufficient for. And it's not your fault. Okay. So, this is a trend that's happening. More and more people are being left high and dry with medication. This is happening by the boatloads right now in the industry. So, a lot of people are looking for a different alternative. And one of the other things that's happening in the industry, the second thing that's happening is a lot of people are naturally turning to talk therapy and a lot of the new adjusted ways that therapy is actually being positioned. So, therapy is by far the oldest method out there for trying to deal with anxiety. It was created in the late 1880s. And what most people don't realize is that in some very important ways, it has not changed much since that period of time. Now, a lot of people have had a lot of hope in therapy recently because on the surface, it seems like there are a lot of new methods and approaches out there. But this is kind of like a smoke and mirrors thing. There really isn't a lot of innovation happening at the method level, but there is a lot of innovation that's being used with the marketing methods that are being used. Okay. So there are, first of all, big companies that have made talk therapy more accessible through telehealth, companies like Talkspace, BetterHelp, etc. And on top of that, in the past 20 or so years, there have been very slight variations of the talk therapy model that have popped up, things like DBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, and the like. So a lot of people have believed that these, variations or these new, quote, new methods are going to be like the missing link, right? That have kept them from their anxiety recovery. But interestingly, when you look at the data, the overwhelming amount of people are not finding therapy or even these variations to be sufficient. So, according to the National Health Service in England, the NHS, quote, despite the widespread use of talk therapy, improvement rates for anxiety remain below 50%, indicating the need for more comprehensive treatment options. Okay, that was in 2024. And then, quote from the National Institute of Mental Health, quote, many patients report feeling they have plateaued with talk therapy after several months, with dissatisfaction stemming from its inability to address the root cause of anxiety, particularly in more severe cases. Additionally, quote, patients often report that while talk therapy helps them cope, it doesn't provide the tools necessary to fully overcome their anxiety. Okay, so think about that. Less than 50% of people are even seeing a positive impact from the talk therapy. That leaves the majority of people not finding therapy to be helpful and certainly not to be sufficient. And so this is a little anecdotal, but in the 8 years of my professional career, I've done about 21,000 hours of documented consulting and coaching with people who have severe anxiety. And well over 75% of the people I've spoken with report that therapy is somewhat helpful, but it's just far from sufficient to provide them the lasting relief from anxiety. A lot of people talk about it like it's like having a friend or a family member to talk to, something like that. And while some people find therapy really helpful, there is just a huge portion of the population, the majority, in fact, that find therapy to not be sufficient. So, especially for perfectionism anxiety, talk therapy is notoriously insufficient. And why is it that so many people are still not getting results? Like, what is going on here? If it's such a widespread practice to do therapy, why are so many people not getting satisfactory results? Well, what most people with perfectionism anxiety don't know is that there are two key things that keep therapists from being able to truly help some patients experience lasting relief, even though the therapists themselves truly care deeply about their patients and they really do want what is best for them. It's really neither the therapist's fault nor the patient's fault, by the way. It's just that the entire system has some major limits sort of baked into it that keep it from working for everybody. Okay, so the very first major limitation is what we call the broken patient myth. So basically, what this means is that therapists are trained that anxiety, perfectionism anxiety as well, is part of a lifelong condition that really just cannot be overcome. Now, mind you, this theory is over 200 years old. I mean, the basis of classifying anxiety as a permanent disorder was Sigmund Freud's work back in the 1880s. And at the time he came up with that theory, that anxiety was an unchangeable disorder. Cigarettes were being prescribed to treat asthma. Bloodletting was still being used as a medical practice, and lobotomies were rising in popularity. I mean, that's how old this theory is. Now, of course, therapists today don't do things exactly like Freud did back then, of course, but there are certain assumptions that are still held on to today that are influencing the way therapists do their work, including the idea that anxiety is largely unchangeable by the patient or the therapist. And so, what that means is that every single thing that a therapist is taught in school is based on the premise that your patient is never really going to be able to recover, but you can help them feel a little bit better, right? In other words, you can help them cope through indefinite therapy. Okay, now let me ask you a question, right? Like, would you ever want to hire a mechanic to work on your car who doesn't know how to fix it, who was never trained how to fix it, who was only ever trained to kind of fix it? I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't. It doesn't really matter how nice that mechanic is or how much they care about me. Like, that's not the person I'm going to be hiring, to solve my problem. So, the second big thing that keeps people with perfectionism anxiety from getting good results is what's called the non-directive principle of therapy. So Freud's entire theory back in the day was that if you just simply, sat someone down in a chair, you let them talk and talk, and if the therapist did not intervene with any direction or advice, that somehow the patient would eventually arrive at new conclusions on their own and work through their issues. He literally referred to this as the talking cure. And this was kind of the pivotal keystone idea of therapy as we know it today. So that idea has been built on many, many times. Carl Rogers built on this idea in the 1950s, and he basically created a mandate for all therapists to hold what he called unconditional positive regard for the patient. So the idea there was sit in the room with the patient, don't judge the patient, just care about the patient, wish for the patient to get better, and hold this space for the patient to process their thoughts and their feelings. And just simply by wishing for the patient to be better, they will be better. Right. And even though today's modern therapists will offer a little bit of advice, it almost never goes beyond this standard set of go-to like 4 to 5 tips and tricks that really only offer mild coping at best. So you've probably heard a therapist say things like this: be kind to yourself. You can't be perfect. Just be sure to do your breathing exercises. Have you tried meditation? Remember, you can't make everyone happy. Be sure to practice self-love. Okay, so there's kind of these like standard things that they'll, throw out there, but it's not anything you can sink your teeth into. And beyond those, 4 to 5 recommendations that they give that, kind of go in one ear out the other, therapists are literally taught in school to, quote, be like a mirror, reflecting the patient's thoughts and feelings back to them for further exploration. And that's why you've probably heard things from a therapist a bunch of times, like, how does that make you feel? Tell me more about that. Okay. And in most cases, with perfectionism anxiety, the therapist is very likely to push the patient to utilize medication because they don't really know any other approach that's really going to cut it and get the results that the person really wants. So the bottom line is that there is just a major, major mismatch between patient and therapist expectations of what the purpose of therapy is. And patients usually want a plan, right? They want a roadmap to recovery and feeling normal again, but no therapist has ever trained in how to provide their patients with a true roadmap for lasting recovery. A lot of people think, oh, well, I didn't have a good fit with my therapist. I need somebody different. But they don't realize like the next therapist that you're with is has gotten 90 to 95% of the same training that the therapist you have right now got. Right. So there's really not much deviation in terms of how they're taught to deal with things. But therapists are taught, that no such map to recovery exists, even though patients are expecting it. And they are only ever really trained in how to help a patient embrace a lifetime of coping. That's really what they're trying to do without saying it out loud like that. And patients believe that, their therapists have this plan or that some therapist out there has a plan, but there is no plan. There's no plan that's taught. In fact, if there is a plan at all, the therapist actually believes that you have the plan hidden somewhere inside of you. And the only plan is for you to keep coming to therapy, keep talking with the hope that eventually and almost accidentally you'll get to feel better. Right. And, to be clear, first of all, I'm not one of these guys that believes that, therapy, like some people will say, oh, the therapist is just trying to keep the patient there long term to bill them. And, I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's the case. I really do believe that therapists are good people. They want what's best for their patients. It's just that they are kind of hamstrung. They don't really know how to truly help beyond the surface, right? And I do want to be clear also, this non-directive approach, it does work for some people. So, if you found the whole non-directive thing to really get you to where you want your mental health to be, that's great. There is a portion of the population that works. It's just that it's less than half of the population. It can be helpful for processing some grief, some forms of isolated trauma, and a portion of the population gets sufficient relief. But as we saw from the data from the NHS, 49% of people only reported experiencing sufficiently positive results, according to the NHS, right? So that leaves over half of people out there kind of hung out to dry. I mean, isn't that alarming? And the people who could keep trying therapy who don't get very far think somehow it's their fault or that it's a matter of mismatched personalities or that the relief will come eventually. But, if so few people are getting satisfactory results, why in the world are so many people staying in therapy for years on end? Well, the main reason people do this, there's three main reasons people stick in therapy. Number one is it's quote free. It's not really free, right? But it's seemingly low cost or free, even though you end up spending countless hours there and years of your life kind of wasted. There's also the whole opportunity cost, right? Like you spend 5 years in therapy, that's 5 years you've been dealing with anxiety. Whereas if you figured out how to actually get to the root source, you could have had those 5 years of your life back. So the hourly rate, sometimes people are paying for their therapy, so there's a cost there, a financial cost. But people forget like an hour of your time is worth something. Like every single person's time is worth an amount, a dollar. You could quantify it even. Like what is that dollar amount of your time worth? So you add that up over time, there is definitely a cost. Number two, it's all the client knows how to do, right? It seems better to do something rather than nothing, of course. And then three, the client keeps hoping that at some point the breakthrough is going to come. They just kind of trust in their therapist or the process. And they're thinking, well, I'm not the expert, you're the expert, right? So they're holding out hope that it's all part of the plan, right? Which is really the most devastating thing. It's like, somebody like being led on for so long only to be devastated and disappointed in the end, right? So again, let's imagine your car is broken down. It's not functioning properly. You can't get from A to B as comfortably as you'd like to. So you go to a mechanic, and this mechanic, who's a really nice guy or gal, right, says to you, "Hey, your car, just to let you know, your car is never going to function fully the same way again. But I tell you what, you keep bringing your car back to my shop every week. We'll keep talking about it. Maybe you'll figure out how to fix it yourself if we talk about it for a few years. Or I tell you what, too, I can give you a couple things, to kind of fix it. We can put an air freshener in there. We can, clean off the windshield for you, stuff like that. And some people do start to feel better about their broken cars after a while of coming here every week. So that might help you too. Oh, and don't worry either. Your car insurance is going to cover the weekly appointments. I mean, does that sound like a good plan? I mean, the two major limitations of the broken patient myth and the non-directive principle were why I deliberately chose not to become a therapist and to find my own way to help people get real lasting recovery. I didn't want to go to school where I could have somebody tell me for 4 years that people couldn't live without anxiety after I had already proven to myself that it was possible to live without anxiety. I just wasn't down for that. Now, I do want to be clear too. One final thing before we move on is I am not coming for therapists here, right? The vast majority of therapists are incredibly caring, intelligent people. They're just doing what they've been trained to do. Many of them are my colleagues and friends, and many of them are quite effective at helping a portion of the population to deal with certain issues, but I see their struggle and frustration in trying to help a portion of people that they're just not equipped to deal with. And that's why year after year, we just keep getting more people referred to us from therapists and counselors because they just don't know what to do. And it's not their fault, that they don't know how to help you. It's just that the whole system and process of how they've been trained has left them unequipped. And if you've tried therapy and found it somewhat valuable, but far from sufficient to deal with your perfectionism anxiety, you are not alone. That's over 50% of people are just like you. Okay. Now, the third thing that's happening in the industry, really fascinating, but really devastating, is that a lot of times people are now trying to figure out how to solve the issue on their own. And we live in a time in human history where this is happening in a kind of unprecedented way. So, if you're anything like I was when my anxiety was at its peak, if you've already tried therapy and medication and those didn't really work for you, you've probably tried to solve the anxiety problem yourself too, right? So, especially in the past 10 years or so, people are trying to be their own therapist or their own mental health coach by turning to the vast abyss of the internet for answers. And if you're anything like I was when I was dealing with anxiety, most of your time is probably spent on the internet in three main chunks, right? The first chunk is compulsively Googling, right? Compulsively Googling the potential source or explanation for any sensation in your body, for where your anxiety is coming from, and you're just constantly trying to find what the real source of the problem is. And you end up convincing yourself of everything from I need to heal my inner child all the way to I need to cut out caffeine. And so you end up drowning in information, but starving for real wisdom, right? The second amount of time that we usually spend on the internet when we're struggling with anxiety is what we call doom scrolling. Right? You spend time just going through funny, distracting, meaningless posts or games, basically just to help your mind temporarily forget how anxious and insecure you feel deep down. And then third, you probably spend a good chunk of your time trying to look for real, tangible answers on how to feel better. But you end up finding only like cheesy surface level content that makes you feel good for like an instant, or that makes you, feel seen or validated. But after months and months of consuming this content, your life still looks exactly the same. The anxiety levels have not changed. And your social media feeds are probably littered with all sorts of motivational, pump up, feel good social media posts, right? Mental health influencers are a dime a dozen these days. And most people have no clue why this is like exploded and why this is happening in the industry. There's two main reasons. Number one, firstly, so many people like yourself are struggling emotionally, especially ever since COVID, right? And the type of content that they engage with is content that simply validates how they currently feel. So basically, influencers have figured out that there is a formula that can be followed to create a particular type of piece of content each and every time, and that it's going to maximize likes and engagements and shares, even though there's not really any substance to it. So maybe you've seen a post like this before. Quote, in today's world of crushing expectations, it's inevitable that you will not feel good enough. It's not your fault that the world is designed to make you feel unworthy. It's okay to not be perfect. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. And if they do, it's time to say goodbye. This is a friendly reminder to take a breath, be kind to yourself, and send positive energy out into the world. So, have you ever seen a post like this? Of course you have, because they all sound like this, right? And do you know why? Is because this post is strategically crafted not to give you a true step by step system for recovery. It is designed to get you to click the like button. That's it. They're literally hacking the biochemistry in your brain to get you to act like a mouse in a maze and press the button that they want you to press. It validates how you already feel without giving you any real way to address the root of the problem. It's empty content, right? And either that, you'll see a post like that, or you might see a post like this every so often. Here's 10 signs that you might actually have XYZ exceptionally rare condition that you've never heard of. Number one, you feel tired when you wake up in the morning. Number two, you feel hungry multiple times a day, especially after several hours between meals. You often feel stressed when thinking about day-to-day responsibilities. Number four, you disagree with others from time to time. Okay. So this type of content is part of what's causing a really, really dangerous phenomenon, which is self-diagnosis. Okay, so a study done in 2023 found that 1 in 4 Americans have self-diagnosed a mental health disorder based on information from social media platforms, TikTok especially being a notable source. This is the platform that, mind you, for years did not allow more than a 60-second bit of information. Okay, but that's what people are going to and using for proof of their self-diagnosis, right? And what this is doing, and by the way, like if you've done this, I don't blame you at all. I did this too. And this was, I was dealing with anxiety long before TikTok was a thing. But the thing I want to warn you about is that this phenomenon is causing people to believe that they know what their real problem is when they actually have no clue. They're just trying to latch onto any explanation that they possibly can. And neither does the person posting the content have any clue what it is that they're doing. Most of these influencers, by the way, have no real experience helping people create real lasting results. They're just putting up content to make people feel good, to give you a little dopamine hit. And this is causing people to run into the problem of feeling certain that they know what the issue is, but actually having a blind spot all along the way. So I consult with people all the time who tell me, that their anxiety is through the roof, but they are totally sure that they have to reparent themselves or that they need to calm their parasympathetic nervous system, right? Or they need ashwagandha or whatever. And I have to just tell them very lovingly, but very firmly, if you knew what the real problem was and how to solve it, you wouldn't have the problem anymore. The fact that the problem is still there is evidence that there is at least one major blind spot. And so people are very often running enthusiastically in the wrong direction. It's kind of this thing where you trying to get yourself out of your own head is kind of like trying to get yourself out of a forest when you're lost in the forest, but you just keep looking around and all the trees look exactly the same, right? The more you try to get out of your head, the more in your head you usually tend to get. And this is what a lot of people are doing when they go to social media and it becomes a big problem. So, um, the reason your feeds, again, are littered with this stuff is because influencers know that the vast majority of people are really just looking to feel understood and to have some kind of an explanation of what their problem is. Usually, an explanation that lets us blame something else other than ourselves, because it'll make ourselves feel a little bit better for the time being. But people don't realize that there's a trend happening right now. It's begun already the past 5 years. It's going to be evident very, very soon. There's basically two camps of people that are emerging right now. There are people who are prioritizing validation-based information over transformation-based information. And I got to tell you, the people who are prioritizing validation-based information are the ones who are staying stuck. The only thing that they're getting is they're feeling more justified in their current limited perception of how things are. So they just feel even more entrenched and correct about their current worldview, as opposed to realizing that the type of thinking that they've had up until now is what's gotten them into the problem they're in. And the only way to get out of the problem is to embrace a new type of thinking. Okay. So there's going to be a big division. You're going to start seeing it more and more in the next 5 years. There's people who are committed to finding real, proven, transformative answers. And then there are people who are looking for just validation. And it's not going to be hard to figure out which one of those people is going to succeed. So let me be very clear, though. I'm not knocking all mental health influencers. They're just doing what they have been incentivized to do. That's it. They create content that will get massive engagement, but results in very little transformation. And they only really teach band-aids and not how to address the root of the problem. And this is a big reason why my team and I, by the way, have strategically not focused on building a massive social media following, but instead we've ruthlessly doubled down on making sure our client success is through the roof. So there's nothing wrong, with like eating some candy every once in a while that just makes you feel good for a few moments. But eventually you got to get your vegetables if you really want to be healthy and prevent disease and live a long life. And the willingness to go beyond the surface level and address the root problem is what separates the people who merely want to recover from the people who actually will. So, if our goal is simply to retrain the brain to stop having automatic anxious thoughts in the first place, why don't we just do that as quickly as possible instead of fussing with all of these other things, right? If we're going to do that, we need a method that works, not these things that are leaving people high and dry. So, what is it that works when nothing else does? Well, if you're truly serious about not just managing your perfectionism anxiety, but really learning how to overcome it, then there's really kind of one simple concept or framework that you've got to understand. This key concept is really what enabled me to finally overcome my own anxiety, stay anxiety free for so long. And I've really never seen an exception to this with the 612 client successes we've had. The first key concept you've got to really understand here is what we refer to as the formula for peace of mind. Now, I know that that sounds maybe a little silly. It might sound like I'm exaggerating here to say there's a formula for peace of mind, like, ooh, who is this guy going to tell me how to accomplish peace of mind, right? But if you'll just bear with me for a second, just try this on for size, and I think you'll see that this really works and that this can give you a real new way to look at how to deal with your anxiety. So, the formula for peace of mind is when your current life conditions, okay, which basically just means how your life is right now, when that matches up with your subconscious rules for life, okay, that's when you will feel peace of mind. And you don't have to take my word for it either, by the way. You can verify if this formula is true just by looking at your own life experience. So just try this on for a second. Okay, in your life, there's probably at least one area where you're generally satisfied. Okay, it could be your health, could be your finances, could be your business, could be your marriage, could be your relationship with your kids, maybe or at least with one of your kids. Okay, I know that happens for people sometimes. And, not everybody is fully satisfied in every area of their life, surely, especially if anxiety is still a part of your daily life. But we all tend, excuse me, well, we all tend to have at least one area we are pretty satisfied with. Hell, it could even just be like one friend in your life that you enjoy or the house you live in. Okay, don't overthink it. So just ask yourself, what is one area in your life that you feel generally at peace with? And I'm going to use a real example here. I had a client a little while ago who had severe perfectionism anxiety. Her name was Jasmine, and Jasmine has shared her story publicly. She's given us her blessing to, talk about her situation. And when I asked her what an area of life was that she was generally pleased with, she said, "I've got really great friends. So I really love my friends." And I said, "Cool. What do you love about your friends?" So she thought about it for a second, and she told me, "Well, we just always do new things together. We do fun things together. We're super close and tight knit. I feel like we tell each other everything. Plus, they've been there for me during some pretty tough moments." And so I said, "Great. Now imagine for a moment if the next time you were with your friends, you guys didn't really have any fun, right? Imagine if all of a sudden your friends seemed reserved and closed off to you. Imagine if they stopped opening up to you and, telling you about what's going on in their life. Imagine also that next time you have a tough moment, they were nowhere to be seen. They were kind of not around, right? If they stepped away and didn't sit with you through that experience. If those things occurred, would that make you upset and anxious? Is what I asked her. And she said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so the reason why it would create anxiety if those things didn't occur anymore is because she didn't realize she had this, but Jasmine had a subconscious set of rules for friendships. And her subconscious set of rules for friendships was my friends should want to do new things. My friends and I should have fun together. My friends should open up to me and tell me things. My friends should be there for me during tough moments. And these rules had become a big part of Jasmine's subconscious beliefs because of her own past experiences. Probably a lot of them, honestly, from her childhood And all a rule is, by the way, it's a belief about what has to happen. That's really all a rule is. So, because this area of Jasmine's life matched up with her subconscious rules, she felt happy about her friendships. She did not feel any anxiety or unrest around her relationship with them. She didn't spend a lot of time in her head thinking about it. But if these core subconscious expectations were to not be met, then you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that it's going to cause Jasmine anxiety. Her mind would be ruminating about her friends all the time. She would be having thoughts like, what's going wrong? What's changed? Do they not like me anymore? Why won't they support me? And so on from there. If the rules were not being met and she didn't either make changes with her friends or make changes to her subconscious rules to get them to balance out, then the anxiety would become more and more consuming as her mind is basically trying to figure out a way to balance the formula. That would be the real problem. Okay, does that make sense? So, if you look at the things you have anxious thoughts about, it's because there is an unmet set of rules, I promise you, right? Now, they are subconscious, meaning that you are unaware of what they are, just like Jasmine was unaware of her subconscious rules, but they are there. Okay, so more on that in a second. So, I was able to show Jasmine why she was pleased with her friendships, but when we took a look at the anxiety that Jasmine was dealing with, it became pretty clear that there was really a different set of subconscious rules that were being violated consistently elsewhere in her life. So she told me that, especially at work, it was a totally different story, right? She was constantly replaying her actions in her head, wondering if she said or did the quote right thing. And she told me that whenever she was in a situation where she couldn't manage every detail, her mind would instantly jump to all the ways she might mess up or fall short. So, she told me that as soon as she even felt a hint of stress, her brain would flood with thoughts like, what if I embarrass myself? Or what if I fail? And those thoughts alone would really paralyze her. She told me that even small deviations from her plans, someone being late, a mistake in her work, a comment taken the wrong way could send her into a spiral of shame or self-doubt. She told me, especially before she needed to speak up in a meeting, she was constantly scanning her physical appearance, her performance, her tone, her impact on others, basically just trying to make sure everything was perfect. She would play out potentially worst case scenarios before she would give a presentation that people would think she was not qualified for, or that she sounded incompetent. And this would cause her to freeze with panic, being unable to perform. It really became a self-fulfilling cycle. And so what I did was I helped Jasmine uncover the subconscious rules that were fueling all of that inner pressure. And so we used a unique process, takes a couple hours, and we discovered that I mean, I couldn't share every single one of them. It would take way too long, but some of the core subconscious rules that Jasmine was abiding by were I should always get things right on the first try. I should be fully prepared and polished in every situation with nothing out of place. I should never disappoint anyone ever. I should always be in control of how others perceive me. I should never mix up my words or misspeak. So, I'm curious for a second. Can you relate to any of these? Probably you can. Now, to be clear, these were not just passing thoughts that Jasmine had from time to time. Although she certainly might have said some of these to herself every once in a while, the thing is that these were actually deep rooted subconscious rules about how life had to be in order for her to feel calm and comfortable, right? So chances are that some of those beliefs are ones that have been holding on, that you maybe have been holding on to subconsciously as well. You may not have even realized that these were beliefs running in the background of your mind. And that's kind of the whole point, they're subconscious, right? But these are probably some of the beliefs that are driving you every day, like running in the back of your head. And so, what this means for Jasmine is that Jasmine had, like we all do, a set of subconscious rules about what had to happen in order to live life, or for it to even be possible for her to feel peace of mind. So, in order for her to go to work, give a presentation, go on a date, etc., right? Those rules had to be met. And if they weren't, she could not function very well. She would feel unable to move forward, basically. And so the key to understand, and then most people get wrong, is it is not enough. It's not enough to acknowledge that you have unrealistic expectations, right? Every person with perfectionism anxiety knows that they have unrealistic expectations and that they should let go of those expectations. However, you've probably also felt that there's basically just this deep rooted core feeling that you can't get rid of those unrealistic expectations, right? And it's not true that you can't do it. It's just that it requires a set of skills for doing that work at the level of the subconscious. Okay. And why is this the case, right? I kind of just answered this, but because these rules, these beliefs are hardwired into the subconscious. Knowing that you shouldn't be governed by the rules is never enough to actually make the change last. And until those rules are rewired, people are automatically governed by the subconscious rules. So people fall into this trap all the time. People will do that thing where they say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I know I can't be perfect. Oh, yeah, yeah, I know that I shouldn't expect to be perfect. I know I shouldn't be so hard on myself. Yeah, 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 I know, I know, I know." And so a lot of times I point this out to people initially and they go, "Yeah, I know, I know, I know." But the thing you got to understand is knowing better will not make you better. Okay. It's like somebody who knows that they shouldn't smoke cigarettes and knows that they want to stop smoking cigarettes, but they keep smoking cigarettes. The knowledge that they shouldn't be smoking the cigarettes is basically useless, right? Until they train themselves to not be smoking the cigarettes anymore. You follow me? So it doesn't really help you to just have the intellectual awareness of what your subconscious rules are. Well, it does because you have to identify those subconscious rules first to change them. But just knowing them is definitely not enough. Okay. And so this is why we have to stop relying on coping mechanisms and start implementing conditioning mechanisms to retrain the brain, or else the anxiety will always be there. That's a very critical point to understand. So in Jasmine's case, the rules that she had for her friendships were being followed, so she felt peace of mind there. But the rules that she had for being able to, go out and about, be around other people, deal with uncertain situations, those were not being met. And so she felt anxious, especially in those scenarios. And so what I had to teach Jasmine in order for her to really overcome the perfectionism anxiety was what every person who truly wants to do the same really has to learn. And that is how to rewrite the rules of the subconscious game that your mind is playing to actually make it winnable. Okay, now what exactly does that mean? Well, what I want you to do is imagine for a second that you are playing a board game for the very first time. Okay, now in order to play the board game, you simply need to know two things. Number one, the goal of the game. Number two, the rules of the game. So if you follow the rules on how to accomplish the goals, then you win. If you fail to follow the rules and you do not accomplish the goal, then you lose. So, what if I told you that you have been subconsciously playing your own game of life according to a simple set of rules ever since you were a kid? And that every moment you of your life that you're trying to play that game, you're trying to win that game. And when you feel like you are, quote, winning, you feel happy and you have zero anxious thoughts. When you feel like you are losing, you experience anxiety. Okay. So let's return to Jasmine. I'll show you exactly how this works. So for Jasmine, within a few hours, I helped her uncover all of her anxiety causing subconscious beliefs. And, Jasmine had been dealing with this perfectionism anxiety for as long as she could remember, ever since she was a kid. And that's how it goes for most people who deal with it. So I knew I had to ask a few key questions to uncover the deep core of where the anxiety was emanating from. So, firstly, I asked her, growing up, whose love did you crave more? Your mother's or your father's? Okay, and here's a hint, by the way. It's usually the person whose love was least freely available. So, very commonly, people want to go, my mother, when their mother was the one that was around all the time and loved them all the time and they spent time with. That's not what we're saying. It's not who did you love more or who loved you more. It's whose love did you crave more. 9 times out of 10, it's the parent figure who gave the love or the attention out less freely. Okay. So your mothers or your fathers. In a small group of people, it could be an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, whoever raised you, or what have you. Okay. And what she thought about for a second is she thought about it for a second and she said it was my mother. So then I asked her another key question, which was, who did you have to be for your mother? Growing up, who was it that you believed that you had to be? What was it you believed that you had to be? And Jasmine was quiet for a moment. And then she thought for a few seconds and she basically said quietly, with this kind of tone of having a major realization, she goes, I had to be perfect. And so, what Jasmine went on to say is that she couldn't ever have something wrong as a child with her outfit, with her speech, with her manners, with her behavior. It seemed like her mom could basically find a flaw in just about anything she did. And so, what I explained to Jasmine was that her mind did what all minds do. It developed a pattern to try to protect her. And the strongest urge in the psyche of all of us as children is to do whatever we must do to ensure that we maintain the love of our parents. Now, why is that the case? Well, it's the case because humans are the only animals on the planet that rely on our parents to put our needs above their own for a really long period of time in order for us to survive. So, in other words, our greatest fear is that our parents will not love us, which is really what it means to put someone's needs above your own, right? That's what love is. And if they don't love us, we fear that they will abandon us. And if they abandon us, we will certainly die. And while this sounds ridiculous, this is the evolutionary advantage that allowed us to survive this long. So while you might be living well into the 21st century, the brain in your skull is about 300,000 years old, still running that default program until we learn how to upgrade it. That's a big problem. So whenever it seems like our parents are pulling love away from us, our mind is on high alert trying to figure out what we do, or excuse me, what we did to make that happen. What in the world did we do to cause them to pull their love away from us? And our subconscious becomes trained to not do that thing anymore. And whenever we are doing something that seems to get our parents to give us more love, or at least attention, our subconscious pays very close attention to that. And we train ourselves without realizing to do more of that thing. And this is basically how we create our concept of who we are as children and young adults. We delete and edit all of the stuff that we think we're not supposed to be, and we try to identify with and claim all the things we believe we're supposed to be. And when you grow up with a parent who seems to find a flaw in almost everything you do, your brain only has the choice of creating a protective pattern of trying to find the flaw in yourself first before someone else can find it, disapprove of it, and take love away from you. It's because the idea there is if I can find the flaw in myself first, I can correct it, and other people won't find it. And if they don't find it, they won't stop loving me. And if they don't stop loving me, they won't abandon me. Okay. And so, in short, her mind, her subconscious became programmed to chase after the following values. Okay. Number one, perfect. Number two, approval. Number three, good enough. Number four, calm. Number five, happy. Okay, so what this means is that the subconscious rule book for Jasmine's game of life was basically I have to be perfect. If I am not, then I won't get others' approval and I won't be good enough. And that might mean that they might leave me. The only way I'm good enough as a person is if I am perfect and if I get others' approval. Only then can I finally let myself feel calm. And only then would it be possible for me to feel happy sustainably. Okay, so you see, if you put all of our rules together, what you basically get is a rule book, or what we call a model of how the world should be. Okay, one of the strongest parts of that mental model of how the world should be is who we must be in order to be good enough and to be loved. So some of us come to believe that we have to be people pleasers. Some of us come to believe that we have to be achievers. Some of us come to believe that we have to solve other people's problems. And some of us come to believe that we have to become perfect. Some of us, it's a lot of us, it's a combination of those, by the way. Okay. And when life matches up or equals our subconscious model of how the world should be, okay, so when life matches our rule book, we feel peaceful and happy. And then when life does not equal our subconscious model of the world of how things should be, our rule book, for a moment, we will feel frustrated. When we feel like life substantially consistently does not match our subconscious model of how the world should be, that's when we start to feel the sensation of anxiety as our mind struggles to figure out a way to get those two to match. Okay. And then when we conclude that life will never match our subconscious model of how the world should be, that's when we start to feel depressed. Okay. That is it. That's where all anxiety and depression comes from. And in my 8 years of doing this professionally, 612 successful client recoveries later, I've never ever seen an exception to this. The only thing that's different is what somebody's unique and specific subconscious rules are. Everyone's a little different. So this explains why Jasmine felt anxious for basically, her entire life because her mind was always subconsciously trying to find a way to get herself to match up with the mental rule book of perfection that she came to believe that she had to be, or else that she was going to be abandoned and probably die, right? So can you relate to this at all? Right? Can you relate to Jasmine's story? More than likely you can. And what do you think is the likelihood that Jasmine will be able to consistently have her life match up with the set of rules that her mind created? That she will be able to be perfect and please everybody? Well, basically about 0%. All right. But as her mind tries to, it's going to create basically like an anxiety attack almost. Okay. So, in other words, her mind wrote a set of rules that made her version of the game completely unwinnable. That's the bottom line. And as a result of her mind requiring things that were going to happen, uh, as a result of her mind requiring things happening that were never going to happen in order to function or do anything else, her mind continuously felt anxious. So, imagine I sat you down in a chair and I made you play a board game, and you cannot leave from your chair until you win that game. You must try your hardest to win, but the only way you can win is if you make zero mistakes and everyone else playing the game approves of your every move and how you look when you make it. Could you see how anxiety inducing that would be? I mean, that's kind of all perfectionism is, really, right? So remember, anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. Okay. And for Jasmine, her brain was perpetually going, I have to be perfect. Ooh, but I can't. I have to be, but I can't. Ooh, but I have to be, but I can't. Okay. And that spiraling process of constantly trying to be perfect and to perfect things that are imperfectible and to please people who are unpleasable all the time is what created anxiety. And when we have a set of subconscious rules wired into our mind that are unwinnable, we end up chasing our own tails inside of our minds perpetually. So, what that means is that until you identify the subconscious rules your mind is operating by and rewire them, you're going to be feeling anxiety. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, then the anxiety disappears. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I've only really shared some of the most important subconscious rules that Jasmine had here, but there were dozens of others that were causing her anxiety. I've never seen two perfectionism anxiety cases where the underlying source is 100% the same because no two people have the same subconscious definition of perfection. So it's imperative to uncover the hidden subconscious rules for you in order to make sure that you can rewire them. It always takes a couple hours, to map out all of the anxiety causing subconscious beliefs. Okay. But let me again remind you that anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. And that means that until you identify the subconscious rules your mind is operating by and rewrite them, you will have anxiety. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules your mind is operating by, and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, the anxiety will disappear. Or at least it's only ever worked when I've taught other people how to do it. Right. So if our job is to rewrite the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by, are we going to do that by talking every week for hours and on end about your childhood, your triggers, your feelings? Are we going to get that by screwing with the chemicals in your brain and numbing you? Is that going to work? Are we going to get that by just allowing the anxiety to exist and try to let it pass by, like DBT would kind of suggest? Are we going to get that by just trying to white knuckle it, do some kind of exposure therapy or get used to it over time? Are we going to do that by just trying to jam as much positive thinking as we can in our head and just tell ourselves to be kinder to ourselves? Are we going to do that by meditating every day or journaling about our feelings or, stare at ourselves in the mirror, trying to remind ourselves to be kind to ourselves, practice self-acceptance until we're blue in the face? No, no, no. None of those are going to work because every single one of those strategies is simply a way to respond to the anxious thoughts. But remember this, the only way to get the anxious thoughts to disappear is to rewire the unwinnable rules in the subconscious. You see, when her subconscious belief was, if I am not perfect, I'm not good enough, that is kind of like the trunk of the tree, and that trunk is now sprouting all kind of anxious thoughts from it, like, is my hair okay? Did I just sound super dumb? I don't think they like me. What if I slip up? I'm such an idiot, right? And 100 other variations. And so, we can use coping mechanisms to try to trim all of the tiny little branches down one by one and temporarily forget that they are there. We can do that for the rest of our life. Or tell you what, we could also just chop the freaking trunk of the tree down. Okay, we don't have to focus on 100 different anxiety causing thoughts a day for the rest of our lives just to get through the day. All we need to do is number one, identify every anxiety causing belief or rule, same difference. Number two, eliminate the unwinnable beliefs or rules. And then three, retrain the brain to follow a winnable set of rules by default. That's all we've got to do. And when we finish the process with Jasmine, when we did finish with her, her mind was automatically chasing after a very different set of values and rules that was actually obtainable. So, starting with the values, she was chasing after number one, growth, number two, self love, number three, confidence, number four, fun. Okay, and she was doing so according to a set of rules that her mind was automatically wired to follow, like no, for growth, right? As long as I try my best, that is plenty enough. And as long as I make some progress, that is success. And then pertaining to self love, right? I will remind myself that just because I exist, I am enough. I simply need to do something with a good intention in order to help other people. And then for fun, I can have fun anytime, anywhere with anyone just by choosing to. Okay, now, but I want to point out because some of this stuff sounds maybe slightly common sense, but remember, it's not enough to just write this stuff down or become aware of it. Okay, so for instance, if everyone with perfectionism anxiety has told themselves, I just need to try my best, everyone has said that to themselves before, but they have not been able to get their mind to actually believe that in their bones and follow that rule by default. That's a really key thing. And that's why the process of conditioning the mind to follow the new rules by default is the secret sauce that almost everyone gets wrong. So by doing it this way, Jasmine no longer had to do any daily maintenance. She no longer had to have coping mechanisms to respond to her anxious thoughts. She didn't need to meditate because there were no thoughts to try to get rid of anymore. And, that rules out again all of the strategies that everyone else is teaching. Now, there are three things that most people get wrong when they try this on their own. And our copycats make these mistakes all of the time with their clients. And you got to look out for these. So, the first thing that people will do wrong is they never identify each and every one of the subconscious anxiety causing beliefs. So there are always like two to three really obvious ones, but most anxiety is caused by the dozens of imperceptible ones. A special process is needed to identify those. So, in other words, it's not like just one trunk of the tree with all the branches, it's more like a mini orchard. We have to, and each one of the trees in the orchard is then sprouting lots of branches. So, we have to identify each and every one of the trees to chop them down. Okay. And then, the second mistake that people will make, our copycats make a lot, is they don't properly teach their people how to get the mind to release and eliminate the anxiety causing beliefs. So they'll help somebody become aware of them, but there's a special process that's needed to actually eliminate them and release them and make sure the mind is not believing them anymore. So it's one thing to become consciously aware that your mind is holding on to rules that don't make sense. It's another thing entirely to train the brain to stop compulsively following those rules by default. Okay. And then third, they don't properly condition the brain to follow the new set of rules by default. So it's not enough to list them out on a piece of paper or to become aware of what you want them to be. You have to hardwire the brain to follow them by default to avoid a lifetime of coping. Okay, but when done properly, there is really no more need for coping skills because the source of the anxious thoughts has really finally been dealt with for once and for all, which is pretty cool. And again, we want to do all of this in just like 90 days, is really what we want to do, right? We don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing this. We don't want to spend years doing this because you're going to spend a lot of time dissecting, analyzing, ruminating. We just want to get the brain rewired and get you back to living the life that you've always wanted, that anxiety has kept you from, because you don't have time for coping, right? We can't put you in a position where you are constantly responding to every anxious thought that comes up. Those strategies take forever and usually don't even work after years of trying them. If you have anxiety, then it's a big problem now. I mean, it's affecting your marriage now. It's affecting your children now. It's affecting your career and earning potential now. It's affecting your sleep now. Your coworkers, your spouse, your boss, your kids, your family, your friends, they need you at your best now, right? You don't have time to spend a ton of time hoping that 6 months from now, some new therapy is going to work or something's going to kick in. You could end up losing your marriage or your career by then. I've seen it happen to people. It could end up affecting your children by then if it isn't already. I mean, hell, I hear people tell me all the time. The most common thing people will say is, "Yeah, I never let my children know that I'm anxious because I refuse to let it affect them." And I have to give them the news flash that your children are far more in tune with what you are feeling than you possibly think. Like when you were a kid, you always knew when your mother or father was upset. Even if they weren't vocalizing it, that almost was worse because then you know mom or dad is upset. And a lot of times as a child, you internalize it and think it's you and it's your fault. So it's a very well-meaning, like sort of willing blindness that people have for themselves where they think that their anxiety is not affecting their family. It is. And in about 80% of the cases I've ever found where there's mental health issues going on with the children, there's mental health issues going on with the parents. So when we fix the mental health issues going on with the parents, 9 times out of 10, that will solve the issues going on with the kids. So these issues start to affect this. Your kids will start to become perceptive right around age 6 or 7. Is usually when that starts to occur. And the parents' patterns of mental health really deeply affect the children's way of being, especially between ages 8 to 14. So I just share that with you because I want you to understand you can't waste a whole lifetime of hoping that the coping mechanisms work. It's not going to work because while you're coping and using those coping skills, your kids are being imprinted upon, right? If you have them, or if not, at least the people around you are. And if you don't, if you're single, right, it's still you're still training yourself every single day, whether you're intending to or not. So the more you continue to rely on the coping mechanisms, those same old patterns of thinking just keep staying the same way and keep ingraining themselves. So what we really have to do is we have to set you up for a system that doesn't rely on coping and gets you to be the one that's in charge of your mental health long term. So how do we do that, right? What does that look like? Well, imagine you have this board game that you can't seem to win. You're really frustrated with it. It's bothering the hell out of you. You keep trying to play it, but you keep losing. And so you come to me as a board game expert, right? And I use my spiffy little checklist. I give you this checklist to help you identify each and every one of the problems that's making the game unwinnable, and we correct them one by one. Then we systematically rewrite the rules so your mind automatically follows the right guidelines. So basically, all we got to do is number one, uncover your existing set of subconscious rules. After all, we can't change something that we don't even know exists in the first place, right? And we don't have to guess. After seeing so many hundreds of perfectionism anxiety cases, it's very easy to predict and identify the underlying beliefs causing the issue. So pretty simple. Number two, we then go through the checklist of the 7 types of rules that cause anxiety, and we systematically remove all of the old rules that are causing you to, quote, lose. Okay. Third, we actually set you up with what you need to be able to play a winnable game, right? We set out what your new belief system needs to be in order to ensure that you actually get the life that you deserve and desire. And then, fourth and finally, perhaps most importantly, we use conditioning strategies that are tailored for your nervous system. Okay, not coping strategies, but conditioning strategies to train the brain to adopt the new rules by default so that you don't have to think about it anymore. Okay, now why is this awesome and way better? Firstly, this is a proven process, right? Like I said before, I've been teaching this successfully, consistently for 8 years. And that's why we've become an industry leader, and others are really starting to take notice. One quote from molecular psychiatry is, studies support that anxiety is a learned response and it can be unlearned through brain retraining techniques. A quote from University of College London is, our research shows that with the right tools, the brain can be conditioned to respond differently to anxiety, enabling long-term relief. Okay. This is also awesome, not just because it's proven, but because it takes you from deeply anxious to anxiety free in just a matter of a few months. Okay, even with extreme anxiety, it's really always just a matter of identify, eliminate, rewire. That's it. It's also awesome because you never have to worry about managing your anxious thoughts ever again because you're dismantling the underlying beliefs that are causing them in the first place, right? If we chop down each one of the trees in the orchard, we don't have to worry about trimming the branches anymore. Right. So there's also no band-aid solutions here. There's no dredging up tons of drama from the past. There's no talking in circles. There's no uncomfortable exposure, no excessive use of willpower just to push through, no more repression. Okay. Rather than feeling like you are adding more things that you have to do in order to get through the day, now you are actually letting things go. It's like finding all of the pebbles in your shoe and removing them. Instead of just taking painkillers, to be able to walk. Okay. And it's also awesome because it doesn't make you reliant on a therapist or a prescription or anybody else, right, in order to live the life that you want. Now you are playing the game of life from the inside out, where you are in charge of how you feel instead of trying to play it from the outside in, where you require things outside of your control to go a certain way in order to feel okay. All right. It's also awesome because you learn a set of skills that you will never forget. You become immune to relapse because you now know how to keep from adopting any limiting subconscious beliefs in the future. And you can teach this to somebody else. You can teach this to your spouse, to your kids. You can often break a generational cycle of mental health issues that's been going on for generations. And then rather than the vicious cycle of anxiety where everything in life gets more and more difficult and more overwhelming, now you tap into the virtuous cycle where everything in your life starts to improve. Your relationship improves, your career improves, everything gets easier and less overwhelming because you finally solved the number one thing holding you back. So, Jasmine, for example, she was able to start excelling in her career without the anxiety in the way. She was holding herself back from taking on more responsibility and getting raises and promotions because she was just feeling overwhelmed and anxious. So after we dealt with all that, she started speaking up, being more confident, taking on responsibility. And she actually sent me this text a couple weeks after she graduated. And she said, "Hey Ty, hey Ty, I haven't touched my meds in weeks. I've 100% realized that I don't have anxiety or depression. Part of me even feels guilty for allowing this to happen for so long, right? So I just want you to see, like, people get in this spiral of staying stuck for a really long time when it's totally unnecessary. And I want you to think, like, see how powerful this process is. And now imagine for a second the relief that you would experience from eliminating all of the anxiety causing beliefs that you have collected over the years. Imagine what would finally be possible if we got rid of that. What most people don't realize is every anxiety causing subconscious belief is like an emergency brake being pulled, right? So you keep trying to jam on the gas to get what you want in life, but you perpetually feel held back. And you have no idea what it is that's holding you back because it's subconscious. Right. Now, I got to warn you, be wary of this. Our copycats always mess up a couple things. They mess up the subconscious belief identification part, as well as the elimination and replacement piece. And that means they end up providing surface level strategies that simply help people respond to and manage their thoughts rather than keeping them from coming back in the first place, which just puts the patient in a spot where they have a lifetime of coping all over again. So I want you to understand that if you do this the right way, this has worked to not only keep myself anxiety free for 15 years, ever since I was hospitalized, but it's also worked in the past 8 years for 612 people like you. It's going to keep working for another 8 years because we base this whole thing on what does not change, which is the human psychology. I've done this with clients as young as 13, old as 84. Doesn't matter how long you've struggled. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter any of that stuff. We can always root out the beliefs that are causing the problem and that are unique to each person. Okay. Even though most people aren't dealing with just perfectionism anxiety, we can always find the unique set of beliefs that's causing them the problem. So if you've been, looking at all of these different coping strategies and feel good content that's out there on social media, and it leaves you feeling kind of empty, like there's a piece missing. It leaves you thinking, God, I just really don't want to have to deal with this forever. I just want to be normal again. Can someone please just give me something tangible and common sense that I can implement right away? I'm telling you, there is a way to get your brain to feel content and think positively by default in just about 90 days without having to rely on ineffective coping mechanisms and without being dependent on anything or anyone long term, which is pretty cool. And that's why I've been in business for 8 years and why we have the best track record of results in the entire industry. We don't get sucked into the fads. We don't get sucked into the trends. We don't try to hack the social media algorithm. And we don't prioritize clicks and views over transformation. We have built our entire methodology on what does not change, and that is human psychology. And we make our clients feel taken care of from start to finish. And that's how we're able to take them from deeply anxious on day one to automatically feeling content and thinking positively by default in just 90 days or less. Okay. So at this point, you do have, a choice in front of you. You can, of course, continue to try these old coping mechanisms that are not working, that statistically are unlikely to work. You have probably already been trying for a really long time. You can keep doing the same thing and hope that something changes, which is the definition of insanity. You can keep hoping something changes on its own, even though hope is of course not a good strategy at all. Hoping that something changes on its own is basically like delegating the responsibility and the power to someone or something else. It's you deciding to believe that you are not the one in charge of your life. And I know that sounds a little extreme, but it is, right? We all ultimately have to come to grips with the fact that the way our life looks is because of the culmination of choices that we've created, whether those have been conscious choices or subconscious choices. And we have to take radical responsibility for both the conscious and subconscious choices that we are making in order to get the mental health that we want and to get the life that we really want. Okay. And, you can also rationalize that now is not the right time to step up and do this and apply this, that you got to wait until you feel ready. You got to wait until that project at work is done. You got to wait until, the kids are out of school for the summer or whatever. And you can find an excuse to kick yourself back on autopilot where really you're either just being lazy or fearful, right? And you'll just allow another 6, 12 months to go by like that, right? It happened to me. I mean, when I was dealing with anxiety and I knew there were things I could be doing to improve it, I remember pressing that mental snooze button and then waking up one day and being like, holy cow, another year of my life has disappeared. I can't allow that to occur again. And it was only once I adopted the belief of I will not tolerate continuing to have anxiety in my life that the changes started to occur. I mean, after all, right? Like, when is the right time to get rid of the crippling, debilitating anxiety that is the number one thing slowing you down in your life and keeping you from enjoying it, keeping you from being present with your kids? Like, how could the answer be anything other than now? That is the number one thing impeding the quality of your life and the lives of the people that you love. I mean, after all, right, it is only your life we're talking about. You know what I mean? So if you do finally want to get the mental health you deserve, and it's completely obtainable, it's possible, hundreds of other people have already done it. We're happy to help you along if you feel like you need some assistance in doing that. So I have set aside some time in the next 24 to 48 hours to speak to you personally about how you can apply these ideas for your mental health today. And basically, on the call, what we're going to do is number one, I'm going to help you identify what the major subconscious beliefs are that are causing the anxiety for you. Again, it's important to pinpoint your exact ones, right? Because what Jasmine's are not going to be exactly what yours are per se. And if we don't identify the exact ones, there's no way to free you from those. Number two, we have to help you identify the alternative beliefs that you need to replace those with. That's going to be very important. And then number three, I'm also going to help you get clear on the 2 to 3 conditioning strategies that will help make the changes automatic. And finally, I'm going to hand you a proven roadmap to lasting recovery and relapse prevention. Okay. It is just a phone call. It's not very long, but it is very powerful, right? We're going to get a lot done in a short period of time. And I'm going to show you the exact steps that you can take to overcome the anxiety for once and for all. And I'm going to custom make for you a roadmap to live every day with calm, peace, joy, and the ability to be present for the ones that you love. Okay. Pretty cool. Right. So my goal is literally to convince you I can help you by actually helping you. Okay. Fair enough. So, and my promise to you also is that this call is going to shave years of your learning curve off to finally getting the mental health you desire and that you deserve. I did recently have a gentleman who had watched a couple of my videos and then did his free call, and he left this comment on my website afterwards. He said, I can't tell you how many times you have said something that I've felt on an atomic level. This is what I've been craving for years from therapy, and I never received. So now, who is this for, right? These calls are completely, totally free, but there is a catch. Okay, here's who this is for. Firstly, getting your anxiety truly dealt with at the core must be a must. Okay, please do not book a call if you're one of those, I'm kind of comfortable being uncomfortable types, or if you're pretty much, if the anxiety is pretty under control, it's not really that severe, it's not bothering you that much. You know what I mean? We only want to focus on helping the people who are in a lot of pain because those are the people who need it, right? So if you're in a lot of pain, we want to help you. But if you're just not going to take it seriously and really implement it, then just don't bother. And then number two, you got to be coachable and you got to be willing to implement what I teach you because this model is so simple and it's so effective. Every person who implements it is going to get control over their anxiety. And so we don't want anyone taking up a time slot who isn't going to implement what we teach them because it robs someone else of a guaranteed change in their life. So just go ahead, click the button under the video, go ahead and grab your spot. Or if you're watching this on social media, you can leave a comment. You can put the word session below in the comments. We'll reach out to you via message to book that free call for you. Otherwise, you might on where you're viewing this, you might see a button right below the video where you can book your spot. Okay. A quick window will open. It'll look like this. It'll take you to a booking page and you can choose an appointment. And I will call you at that time. It will be over the phone, or if you are international, I'll call you on WhatsApp. Okay. Spaces are very limited. The calendar fills up fast. So definitely be sure to go grab your spot now. And, just in conclusion, I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I mean, listen, this ability that I've shown you how to do, how to identify, eliminate, and replace all of your anxiety causing beliefs in the subconscious. I mean, this is the single most important thing that you can know how to do to live a life without anxiety. So you can spend the next 5 years trying to use coping mechanisms that have already been proven to be ineffective, hoping that something changes on its own. You can wait for some magic moment where it feels easy and just right to tackle this, which is never going to happen. Or you can simply just start taking some baby steps and follow a simple process like this. It is the simplest possible approach. And when you do it right, it's the only system that ensures that you deal with the problem at the root and that you establish your long-term independence. No crutches, no band-aid solutions, no roundabout passive strategies, no temporary pump-up BS, just rewiring the brain to think positively by default in a way that sets you up for a lifetime without anxiety so you can show up for those that you love in the way you are craving to. All right, I'm Ty Hicks. Go ahead, click the button under the video and book that call, and I will see you when we talk soon.